Welcome in, everyone. Let's just dive right into it. Today, our explainer is actually taking a trip way back in time, specifically to Kerala, India, nearly a century ago. We're going to be looking at a seriously fascinating historical document that tries to take some pretty massive, complex theological ideas and distill them down into a super structured logical framework. It's really this incredible snapshot of exactly how ideas were communicated back in 1937, and we're going to break the whole thing down using the author's exact sequence. Now, right on the title page of this 1937 book, Christian Faith and Practice, by Reverend H.U.W. Stanton, you can really see the intent behind the whole project. This wasn't written to be some sprawling, abstract philosophical debate. No, it was designed as a practical handbook. Published with the permission of the United Society for Christian Literature, it basically served as a systematic guide for readers in Kerala to really grasp Christian tenets. It's just a brilliant piece of historical literature, mostly because it shows us exactly how foundational religious concepts were taught and structured in that very specific time and place. So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the historical document itself, then look at the Bible as a foundational text. From there, we cover God as creator and love, then humanity and conscience, and finally, sin as separation from God. You know, to really understand a book, you've kind of got to look at its skeleton first. Stanton was incredibly systematic with his index. He starts with the absolute basics, the source of authority, and then logically builds his case upward. He moves from the creator to the creation, and then straight into the primary conflict within that creation. So to make sure we're really grasping his logic, we're going to mirror this exact progression as we build our own understanding step by step.
Part 2. The Bible. Foundational Text.
Opening up the very first chapter, which is simply titled The Bible, Stanton points out right away that it's actually a misconception to think of it as a single unified volume. He immediately draws our attention to the etymology, explaining that the name derives from the plural word biblia, literally meaning books. He really wants his readers to conceptualize it as a curated library, rather than, say, a singular novel. It's a vast collection of diverse writings that, according to the text, were brought together under divine guidance. And there's a specific number he uses that brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of that collection. 1,700. Stanton highlights this concrete historical data point right out of the gate. He points out that these books were composed over a remarkable span of roughly 1,700 years. I mean, really think about that time frame for a second. That covers the rise and fall of multiple ancient empires. By focusing on this massive number, Stanton is emphasizing to his 1937 audience that the text they're studying isn't just the isolated work of one author in a single era. No, it's a multi-generational project involving various authors across vast stretches of human history. Within that massive library, Stanton makes a really sharp distinction between the Old and New Testaments. He contrasts them like this. The Old Testament is framed as a period of preparation. It focuses heavily on the establishment of the law, humanity's historical struggles to keep that law, and ultimately the resulting need for a savior. The New Testament, on the flip side, is framed entirely around fulfillment. It details the historical life of Christ, introduces grace as opposed to just law, and covers the subsequent formation of the early church. So it's a very classic setup and resolution structure. Moving right along to part 3, God, creator and love. Now, Stanton lists several key attributes to define the creator. He describes God as eternal, meaning existing completely outside of time, and omnipresent, which means existing without any physical limitations or boundaries. He also really emphasizes that God is holy. And in this specific context, that means being absolutely pure and serving as the foundational bedrock of a moral universe. Plus, of course, God is the creator of literally all things. But out of all these descriptions, there is one attribute that Stanton elevates way above the rest. And that is the phrase, God is love. This is absolutely crucial because Stanton explicitly singles this concept out. Amidst all the grand descriptions of vast, limitless power and supreme authority, the author points to love as the ultimate expression, the absolute highest and most defining attribute of God's nature. In this framework, love is essentially the animating force behind everything else he describes in the entire book. The source text actually explores a pretty delicate balance here. On the one hand, you've got God's strict holiness, this uncompromising moral standard. But on the other hand, you have this boundless, defining love. And according to the handbook, it is precisely this specific combination, holiness encountering love, that drives God's ultimate desire to impart grace to humanity, rather than just handing down strict judgment. Section 4. Humanity and Conscience. Here, the text breaks down humanity into a few distinct interacting components. You have the body, which is the physical vessel, the soul serving as the seat of personality and life, and the spirit, which is the specific element capable of connecting with the divine. But really, the absolute anchor of this whole section is free will. Stanton is crystal clear on this. Humans are not just automated machines. We are granted the agency to choose obedience or to choose rebellion, because without that free will, the rest of this entire theological framework just wouldn't function. And to actually help guide that free will, Stanton introduces a totally fascinating definition of conscience. He doesn't just call it a gut feeling. No, the text frames conscience as an inner judge. It's described as a literal divine spark placed right inside the human mind by the Creator to constantly evaluate the morality of our actions. Basically, it's the internal compass meant to guide human free will toward what is right. However, Stanton does include a pretty strong warning with this. While the conscience acts as this incredible divine compass, it's definitely not indestructible. The text argues that if a person continuously uses their free will to just ignore its warnings, that inner judge can actually become dulled, corrupted, or even completely silenced over time. And it's exactly this failure of the conscience that sets the stage for the primary conflict of the entire book. Which brings us to our final section: sin, separation from God. When he starts discussing sin, it's really vital to note how impartially Stanton frames this for his readers. He goes way beyond the idea of sin merely being some simple moral mistake or a social faux pas. In this framework, sin is an active rebellion. Since humans have free will and that built-in inner judge, choosing to go against that design is seen as an intentional failure to hit the divine standard. And the consequence of that active rebellion, at least according to this 1937 text, is incredibly severe. Stanton defines the ultimate result of sin not just as punishment, but as a fundamental separation. It is a profound alienation of humanity from God's presence. Remember, God was established earlier as the source of all life and holiness, so this separation essentially cuts humanity off from their very life source, creating this massive, seemingly insurmountable gap. So Stanton has systematically built this framework, where a holy, loving God and a free-willed humanity are profoundly separated by the reality of human rebellion. It's kind of the ultimate theological cliffhanger. So how does the text propose bridging this ultimate divide? Well, that is the exact question that sets up the entire remainder of Stanton Handbook on Redemption. It's quite a lot to think about, so we'll leave you to ponder exactly how that gap might be crossed. Thanks for exploring this historical text with us today.